Germany's Chancellor issued harsh words to Russia, stating that Europe will never allow Russia to win. Moscow dismissed this with contempt. But does Europe have the strength to achieve this? As we all know, Europe has stronger economic power, political influence no less than Russia's, and a host of advanced military equipment. However, it also has a fatal flaw. If this flaw cannot be remedied, it will be difficult to truly counterbalance Russia. This flaw is that Europe is not a single entity, but a collection of independent countries, making it even hard to achieve complete consistency in actions. The EU alone has 27 member states, and each member state has the right to vote on any major EU decision. Behind this lie 27 different interest demands. The most typical example is Hungary. Though a small country within the EU, Hungary has repeatedly obstructed the EU's Ukraine-8 proposals. Even though the EU has been striving to implement a relatively unified policy toward Russia for more than 3 years, and even though most member states, as well as the EU's two major institutions, the European Council and the European Commission regard Russia as a major threat, Hungary still adheres to a pro-Russia stance, or rather, is unwilling to sacrifice its own national interests to support a meaningless war. Yet the EU has no effective way to deal with Hungary. If the EU is so divided, Europe as a whole is even more fragmented. On the other hand, while there are many established powers among European countries, each has a too small individual size and has neglected military preparedness for years. It is even more unrealistic for any of them to counterbalance Russia alone. Therefore, if Europe cannot truly achieve unified action, especially unified action in its policy toward Russia, saying that it will never allow Russia to win may be an overstatement. This is still at the political level. At the military level, it is even harder for Europe to form a cohesive force. For example, on the issue of whether to send troops to Ukraine, Europe cannot reach a unified opinion. Even Italy, a G7 member and a traditional European power, opposes it. On the other hand, Europe's current military strength has no advantages whatsoever when facing Russia. Since worldwide, Europe has become accustomed to hiding under the United States wing. After the end of the Cold War, it has neglected military preparedness even more. To win votes, politicians have continuously cut defense spending, resulting in the military strength of Europe's established today being little more than an empty shell. Not only is there a lack of skill, but the qualitative advantage is also gradually being lost. To date, the total number of active -duty troops of Europe's three major powers, Britain, France, and Germany, adds up to only 510,000, equivalent to just 1/3 of Russia's. Although they still have relatively advanced equipment, they have fallen behind in the research and development of new weapons. For instance, China and the United States are already developing 6th-generation fighter jets, and China's 6th-generation fighter jet has long completed its first test flight. Even Russia has 5th-generation fighter jets like the Su-57, but Europe, represented by France, a former aviation power, only has 4th-generation fighter jets like the Rafale and Typhoon. Another example, in terms of long-range missiles and hypersonic missiles, Europe's established powers are not even comparable to countries like Iran and North Korea, which have been under severe sanctions for years. To this day, apart from medium-range and short-range cruise missiles such as the Storm Shadow and Taurus, they have achieved nothing else. Although Europe woke up after being sidelined by Trump on the Russia-Ukraine issue, the EU, along with member states like France and Germany within it, as well as Britain, which has long left the EU, have all passed bills to significantly increase defense budgets and begun to strengthen national defense capabilities. However, national defense development cannot be completed in 3 to 5 days. It will be difficult to achieve qualitative improvement without 10 to 8 years. Therefore, what Europe needs most now is time. As a highly developed region, Europe lacks neither funds nor technology, nor glorious history. Germany, Europe's economically and industrially strongest country, has already shouted the slogan of rebuilding Europe's most powerful army. At the end of last month, Germany's Bundestag just passed the 2026 budget bill, in which the military expenditure for 2026 will increase significantly by 18.9%, reaching 108 billion euros. Globally, this is second only to the United States, China, and Russia, which is in a state of war. Before the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022, Germany's defense budget was only 55.75 billion euros. This is not the end. However, at the NATO summit in The Hague last June, a resolution was adopted stating that all NATO member states, except the United States, will increase their military spending to 5% of their respective GDPs within 10 years. In 2024, Germany's GDP was $4.66 trillion US. Even if there is no growth in 10 years, military spending accounting for 5% of GDP will reach $233 billion US, more than double Germany's 2026 defense budget. Therefore, for Germany, there is still enormous room to increase military spending. Germany is just one example. Other NATO member states in Europe are the same. Currently, among NATO member states except the United States, the average military spending as a percentage of GDP is only about 2.5%, so all have significant room to raise military expenditures, reflected in national defense development. This will mean more funds invested in weapons research and development, more advanced weapons deployed, and qualitative improvements in both military scale and strength. Thus, Europe's current claim that it will never allow Russia to win may be difficult to achieve now, but given time, Europe will indeed have the confidence and strength to make this statement in the future. But can the Russia minus Ukraine conflict last for 10 years? I'm afraid that is unrealistic.